Supposed Bible contradiction. Did Jesus name the wrong high priest? In Mark 2, Jesus allows his disciples to go through grain fields to gather food on the Sabbath. The Pharisees see this and criticize Jesus for allowing his disciples to work on the Sabbath. Jesus responds by explaining the purpose of the Sabbath and gives an example of how David entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence. However, in giving the example, Jesus says the high priest was Abiathar. But in 1 Samuel 21, the priest that gave David bread was Ahimelech. So did Jesus misspeak and name the wrong high priest from this event? This issue is famous because Bart Ehrman says it was the first step that led him away from Christianity. But is this really a big issue? For one thing, Mark 2:26 may only say this event happened in the days of Abiathar, which would be true, as Abiathar was alive at this time and fled to David just after Saul killed Ahimelech. He was Ahimelech's son and became a high priest that reigned for several decades after this, and Abiathar most likely would have been present during this episode with David and the bread. Some reply that the Greek phrase in Mark should be translated as when Abiathar was the high priest, meaning it should be translated to say Jesus thought Abiathar was already high priest. But the scholar Dan Wallace says this rendering is possible, but it's not a necessary reading. The construction epi plus genitive noun is frequently used with a temporal sense outside of Mark, with a meaning similar to in the days of. BDAG lists numerous biblical and patristic references under epi with a genitive for time, all in the sense of in the time of, under kings or other rulers. For example, Luke 4:27, Luke 3:2, and even Mark 2:26. So if we apply the principle of charity, one can argue the phrase means in the time of Abiathar, and does not necessarily mean he was already high priest at the time. This would be like saying that during the
What does it mean by in the time of him, but he is not yet? Meaning in the time that he is living, in the time of his life, is that what it means?
life of Augustus, Cleopatra and Mark Antony died after they were defeated in battle. But their deaths happened before Octavian was given the name of Augustus. But generalizing like this, referring to Octavian by his more well-known name Augustus, does not mean one made an error in reporting the history. The scholar Edward D. Andrews concurs with Dan Wallace and adds an example to help support this understanding. He first cites other verses where similar Greek phrasing likely means in the time of, and notes, Jesus did not state that Abiathar was high priest at the time of the incident, only in the time of. Contextually, Abiathar is actually present when the event took place.
So one have to know Greek to understand certain context, right? Which is all the four gospel written in Greek by Greek-speaking people?
Then Andrews notes that Ehrman himself expresses himself in a similar way that Jesus did, and it doesn't mean that Ehrman made an historical error. In his book Misquoting Jesus, Ehrman states, Jesus wants to show the Pharisees that Sabbath was made for humans, not humans for the Sabbath, and so reminds them of what the great King David had done when he and his men were hungry. Now they went into the temple when Abiathar was the high priest, and ate the showbread, which was only for the priest to eat. Andrews notes that Ehrman refers to David as King David, but David was not yet king in 1 Samuel 21. Saul was still king. Ehrman also says they went into the temple, but the temple wasn't built until Solomon's reign. They went into the tabernacle at Nob. So if Ehrman can use this language and not be accused of making an historical error, why couldn't Jesus use similar phraseology to refer to the general time and mention a well-known high priest as the reference point? He is merely referring to the time of Abiathar, who was a well-known high priest. Andrew says, here we have a world-renowned Bible scholar who uses a loose reference in his book and expects that his audience will understand what he means by his way of wording things. Was Ehrman technically chronologically wrong? Yes, in the strictest sense of things, if one wishes to be unreasonable. However, if we recognize this is an acceptable way of human expression, then he is not wrong, because he knows his audience will understand his loose reference, and so it goes with Jesus as well. Most importantly is the context of which Jesus uses this example. Abiathar was more well known for adhering to the law than Ahimelech. In the context of Mark 2, Jesus is essentially saying back to the Pharisees, look what took place in the presence of the upstanding Abiathar, and he did not see any issue with it. Are you a better judge of what is lawful than the great high priest Abiathar we all know so well? Since in the time of Jesus, Abiathar was well known for upholding the law, it would have made more sense to reference him in the context of keeping the law properly, over mentioning Ahimelech. Ahimelech did not have the same reputation Abiathar had for holding fast to the law. So in context of Mark 2,
this discussion is about holding on the law, right? What Jesus said?
A better judge of what is lawful than the great high priest Abiathar we all know so well? Are you a better judge of what is lawful than the great high...
The discussion about law, I thought Christianity no longer, do they have still law? Because I'm not well informed in this, but normally when the topic of law, the law of the Torah is being forced, I think some Christian would say that that's no longer valid, right? So what law is there a new law, new set of law, or just selective law that still withstand, or this is just talk that ends with the death of Jesus, because the death is the one that took off the law? I'm not sure.
High Priest Abiathar holding the law. Ahimelech did not have the same reputation Abiathar had for holding fast to the law. So in context of Mark 2, with Jesus' overall message, it does make more sense to mention Abiathar. We have to remember the context from where this verse comes from. Also, the scholar Maurice Casey studied the Aramaic behind the Greek phrase in Mark and suggests the wording may be rendered too literal in Greek.
Wait, Aramaic source of Mark's Gospel. So meaning, okay, so Mark's Gospel is written in Greek, is it? But it is based on source in Aramaic. Is that the case? So meaning that someone else have written something in Aramaic, and Mark's Gospel is written in a different language by a different author that cite the original author. I'm assuming the Aramaic source is the original author, or various authorships. I don't know. Did the author of Mark specify where did he got the Aramaic source from, or this is drawn from somewhere?
The Aramaic phrasing may only indicate that he was a great or renowned priest. Abiathar was much more important than Ahimelech, and his presence may reasonably be deduced from the narrative in 1 Samuel. High priest is an accurate description of what Abiathar was famous as, and does not necessarily carry the implication clear in Mark's Greek that he was high priest at the time of the incident. Furthermore, high priest may have meant only that he was one of the most important priestly authorities, the high priest of the later Markan narrative. Abiathar was in either case outstanding, and correct observance of the law in his days could safely be assumed. In other words, Jesus in Aramaic may only have been referring to Abiathar as a renowned priest, and not necessarily the official high priest. But either way, the point of the passage
Does that mean there's a translation issue?
is to mention Abiathar, since he was the high priest known for upholding the law so well. Ahimelech did not have the same type of high reputation. So given the context, the grammar, and a charitable understanding of human expression, this passage is hardly an issue. Thus this supposed contradiction can be resolved.
Alright, so yeah, I don't have anything to comment there, because even the contradiction itself, I do not know where to put it and what to place. What exactly is the initially I thought it's the mention of the name, but later on it says that it's just, I don't know. So yeah, there's nothing much that I can, because I'm not well aware of this to begin with. So yeah. So what do you think? Feel free to add on whatever things that I missed. Thank you for watching. See you next time.